All right, everybody, welcome to the show. We have a very special guest. Well, I do know his real name, so I will share real name. We have special guest Ryan Lee, or as I know him, guy I met at a bar. We will get into his, and I'll introduce you in a second, Ryan. I guess I just did. So while I was out in Knoxville a few weeks ago, I told you guys about this. While I was out there, I was out celebrating my birthday. I felt like a real piece of shit because I was, a few miles or so away from one of the worst natural disasters that have happened in modern U.S. history. And I was like, I really feel like I should be doing more to help. And I happened to see you. I went down. Natasha wanted some drinks from the bar, so I grabbed some drinks and I was heading back up. And you were, like, hey, what are you here for? We chatted really quick. I told you it was my birthday. We got some shots. We started talking real quick. And before long, you made me feel like it was probably not the worst thing in the world to not just be an extra person there trying to help. And I'm getting a little too much into it, but this is the guest that I've been talking to you guys about. Ryan's been doing some disaster relief out in Carolina, mostly, right? Mostly Carolina.
Yeah, pretty much all in Western North Carolina, although it's hard to get there
Okay.
without passing through and seeing some of the damages in Tennessee. But like you said, you can't just stop and help like a lot of people wanted to. So yeah, my work's been
Yeah.
concentrated in my home state of North Kakalaki.
So tell us a little about yourself. Also, I need to get this out of the way once and not ever again. Anytime I hear North Carolina, I always want to say, look, Petey, I grew up with the Petey Pablo era, so take your shirt off, twist it around your head like a helicopter. Yep, there we go. You get
No,
it. It's
no,
really
no.
nice. We're in good company here.
Hey, that's
Absolutely.
what makes us famous around the world. Everywhere I've lived around the world, especially in more developing areas, you get people like, "Oh, take your shirt off," and I'm like, "Well, I feel like I
Twist
have
it around your
to."
Gotta
head.
do it now.
Yeah,
Petey Pablo Thomas.
you're gonna
So
regret.
please tell us a little about yourself. Tell us how you. I feel like when we met, one of the things that very quickly you'd sort of said that you had a background that was in this. You went elsewhere in your career, but you felt very satisfied, despite the tragedy of it, to get to apply something you were really good at from maybe a prior career. Tell me how you got into the position you're at to be doing this kind of aid.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, in short, I've had a very nonlinear career path. I've been a lawyer on the criminal side, on the entrepreneurial side, worked in startups kind of around the world. But one of my most important endeavors for me, for my development, for my finding passion in life, has been in humanitarian relief and responding to areas that are either going through a long-term, ongoing humanitarian crisis, like refugee settlements in Uganda, or to just dealing with more acute situations on the ground. But through that experience, one thing I've learned is how to find out if you're going to actually be helpful, how to contribute to those situations and not get in the way, and bring a little bit of kind of the leadership and coordination. And I'll do anything, just let me know where it is. And again, most importantly, helping without getting in the way. So when disaster struck, you know, it was chaos. I talked to a buddy who had been up there to go chainsaw his dad out of his house and just gave me a report on the ground, the day after the storm.
He was chainsawing the house, right? Not his.
Yeah, he did not chainsaw
This
his
isn't.
dad.
This isn't. This isn't like a walk tall or walk hard.
No,
Um,
Dewey
this is not
Cox.
bad
Texas.
case of being cut in half.
No, in North Carolina, we like to use our chainsaws on trees. You got to go down to Texas for the human
Right.
thing, I think.
Oh, it's Texas.
Right.
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah, but he told me a lot about what was going on, and that there's announcements out in the public of don't necessarily come here. Like we don't want people to come and interrupt disaster relief efforts. But anyone that got there on the ground saw just how desperate they needed anything that could help. And so, I was coming through. That's how we met in Knoxville, and I was coming through from the Northwest into Madison County, North Carolina, which is a very special place to me and my family, and just knew, I'd find out pretty quickly. And my thought was worst case scenario, I'd just turn around and maybe leave the supplies I have and, figure it out. But when I got there, sure enough, that was not the situation. I was thrown into so many places I didn't know how to balance my time.
You
Wow.
told me you'd right when I had seen you, you'd just experienced mud poisoning, which is a new word for me.
Yep. Oh yeah, that's right. We met in between two of my trips in there. So I went in the first day, figured out, the most important questions: who's in charge, meet those people. If you have a rapport, they
It's
want you to
Joe
stick
Biden,
around.
right? And it's the reason why none of the helicopters worked was also
Yeah,
Joe Biden, right?
exactly. Yeah, Chinook Joe, you know.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. All
And
right.
yeah,
Sorry.
so I
Go on.
found that out in the early areas, and my first moments on the ground were just driving around, talking my way past police officers to go see the damage up close and personal, and just figure out what was needed and what could be done. And so then I returned to Knoxville to get a lot of supplies. A lot of those, you were talking about the mud. So in the town of Marshall, where I was, which is a beautiful old historic town. It looks like quintessential 19th century, early 19th century American town, built on a river with a railroad track running through, and now the old jail is a hotel and that kind of place, and it got wiped off the map. I mean, if we had the ability to show some videos, like there was a river running through with a few buildings sticking out at the top, like a steeple and some of the taller ones. And when all of that came through, it picks up sewage, it picks up dead creatures, human and otherwise. It picks up chemicals. Think about how much chemicals are required to run everything in our house. Our air conditioners, you got gas lines, and of course all of our shit. And so when the river rises, it runs through all these buildings, it picks up all this stuff, and then it just sucks it right back down and leaves it there. So the mud became very toxic. And oh yeah, hey Jamie, pull that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you
So
see right there.
So that gave you mud disease.
Yeah, so we had to go in, and that was my first stop back in Knoxville. They're like, we need PPE to get down there. I mean, we have N95s, but we need like proper ventilators. We need hazmat suits. We need rubber boots. We need to make sure that no one touches anything in there. And so, we all went down. I went down with one of the first teams, some of the first responders. It was, me, some guys from the Cajun Navy, and a couple other locals that had no idea what we were in for, and we were getting the toxic sludge out, and I had a ventilator on, and just in one process of cleaning it, I got a tiny bit of mud that I guess had gotten stuck in my stash, and I got it into my mouth, and 12 hours later, I was vomiting quite profusely for some time.
Just from the chemicals that have been leached into the mud and essentially,
yeah,
right?
you just get, all the things that cause disease that used to plague communities and still do in some developing parts of the world. But, E. coli, the bases for dysentery, it's just kind of all the things you never want in your system.
It's a mix of chemicals and sewage and all kinds of shit, right? How do they even treat that? Because they don't really know exactly what it is that's causing it, right?
For stuff like that, it's the only cure is evacuate it, and that's always fun. It's one of those, you don't want to take like a Zofran or something because you need it to get out of your system. But it was toxic sludge. Even when I drove back down a couple weeks later with my family, I went to go just safely drive with the windows up and show my 4-year-old daughter just what carnage had happened. And we were driving down, and the speed limit signs coming in say, drive extra slow, toxic dust. Like even the dust that had settled up there was still just stuff you do not want in your system. And I felt the effects of that both respiratorily and gastrointestinally.
I think that's something that people don't necessarily associate with a storm damage like that. You understand the impact of houses being torn away, buildings, all that stuff. But that's kind of one of those things we don't really think about that much. You talk about being there to help and not be in the way. So I'm imagining like sort of like tragedy tourists, like people with trying to do something on Instagram or YouTube or something like that. Is that kind of what it is, or are there people that have good intentions that just really don't belong in those situations?
It's both. I heard the phrase quite often, fucking YouTubers. There was a lot of people coming in, just, I want to get the video, I want to post a selfie with me with some destruction behind me, and then tell all my followers all this, or whatever their motives were. Most not so altruistic, but on the other hand of that, there are a lot of people who, and I started a social media campaign. I'd been off Instagram for a long time, just due to just some political arguments I'd gotten on there a while back that just not mentally healthy, and so I'd been staying away from really anything. People were wondering if my kids were still alive and all that, but I opened it back up for this and was running campaigns, and people were, reaching out in droves in the very beginning, and that's a point we want to get to now. Is later is the dwindling of focus, attention, the
Support.
human attention span, and everything. But in the beginning, just a massive influx. I want to go. Where can I go? What can I bring? What can I do? So you get a lot of those well-intentioned people up there, but a lot of them don't have experience in this, so they'll be like, I had people blocking a supply drop-off point, just one guy slowly unloading one item at a time from his Subaru, blocking off a whole caravan of people that needed to get stuff in and on to their next mission. And it's just well-intentioned
And is this
people.
because of the lack of like incoming roads to use? On top of that, they're just compounding the fact that all the roads got washed out and just not being aware of that they became an obstacle at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they're trying to help, but they don't know where to go or what to do, and there's just the infrastructure and road situation there. I mean, even before so many roads got washed out or mudslided or just completely wiped off the map, it was already kind of difficult. There's only so many ways from A to B anywhere, and
Right.
so anyone congesting any of those pipelines is going to be disrupting all the other work. And so, yeah, to answer your question, there's a lot of well-intentioned people there that end up doing more harm than good, and that's something it's tough, because you don't want to turn away someone with a good heart trying to do the right thing, but if they're going to make it harder for other people to do the effective thing, it's a problem.
Well, and then I imagine you turn around the wrong person for the right reasons, and then they, with their YouTube platform, turn around and start spreading all these stories about. Now, we haven't talked about this, so I don't know where this is going to go, but I know how me and Alan's perspective of this is, that a lot of people were opportunists to amplify their platform at the expense of saying that this was being managed so poorly. Now, I don't doubt it was managed poorly. You're not going to catch me coming on here being like, it's a great government agency, FEMA. Never had a history of problems. Always the bureaucracy, smooth as butter. Of course not,
Always.
right? But you're only making it worse to draw attention to yourself, to amplify a story that is, maybe gets followers for you. I'm sort of rambling, but you must have experienced that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we could spend the whole conversation
Talk a little
on that.
bit about that.
Just one more point on the previous one thing that became a real problem with people, the well-intentioned coming in, was people that don't have the capacity to self-rescue, that would try to go into the more ravaged parts, and then they would get stuck. And so the SNR teams that are supposed to be out there saving the local impacted communities and citizens and people that have been cut off from the whole world without supplies and obviously without any utilities, instead of being able to get in and rescue them, now they're having to help these people from Charlotte that drove up and wanted to be heroes and ran off the road, and now they're stuck and they're at risk to harm or die in the woods. And that now, in addition to being in the way, they're having to divert the critical and limited resources to help the local people to help these idiots. And I don't mean to call them idiots because they were well-intentioned, but going up there without the ability to self-rescue is an idiot.
No, I think idiots is fair.
Well, and self-rescue is the important word. I mean, it's been too many years since I've done it, but for much of my life, I consider myself a pretty aggressive rock climber. And one of the first things I did before I got into it was learning a lot of self-rescue tricks. Can you tie a prusik knot? Like, do you know how to ascend with like a loop of rope? Like, how can you get yourself out of a jam so that you don't become a problem? And
are you going to be an immediate risk?
Like
I brought enough stuff. I brought all my camping gear. My whole back seat was just stuff for myself, with the means to survive for, easily a week in the woods if I needed to.
Because you didn't know what you were getting yourself into while trying to provide assistance. Yeah.
Yeah. If I got hit by a mudslide while I was there, I'd be able to stay put, and operations could continue as normal, and I could have just camped out if I needed to. And then people just don't think about that. But
you could have had your little personal disaster that you could have gotten through. And then,
you got the people there like, this is our disaster, motherfuckers. Like, what? but on the the rumor front, you did see a lot of damage from that, because politicians, it's an election season, is not news to anybody. But politicians taking a quick opportunity to get down there and boost their chance of electability by saying, Kamala Harris ruined FEMA and all of this, even though, people tend to forget that Congress funds FEMA and, who's in charge of Congress
Thank
right
you.
now.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Also, last time I checked, vice presidents go to funerals and cast deciding votes. Like,
That's it.
this is the most overreaching vice president I've ever heard of in my lifetime. And again, don't catch me saying nice things about her. I just mean we don't have to make unnecessary. We can talk about the things we don't like about her if you want to do that, but you don't have to just add shit on for no reason,
Right.
but
and
we
people
all
just saw
know
it as an
because
opportunity to-
Marjorie. Absolutely. Go ahead. Okay.
No,
we all know Marjorie Taylor.
You're going down MGT. I want to hear it.
You two outpolite each other.
This is going to be entertaining, so let's roll with that one.
Marjorie Taylor Greene taught us that the government's weather machines caused this, so that red states wouldn't be able to vote.
Lithium. Because of the lithium.
Because of the lithium. We all
They
know
overlooked
this,
the
of course.
detail. They hear the word mountain, so when they hear that Kings Mountain is one of the most one of the bigger lithium deposits in the region, they think, okay, so they built a hurricane. We're not going to use this on our enemies. No, we're not going to disrupt Chinese progress with this. We're going to do it to ourselves for lithium.
Yep.
But unfortunately, the lithium mines are around the Kings Mountain area in North Carolina, which, as a native Charlottean, I can tell you exactly where that is. It is a half-hour drive from Charlotte, if that. It is 91 miles from downtown Asheville and was completely unaffected. So not only did the government control the hurricane, but they missed.
Damn it. Damn it. I hate it when that happens. When my hurricane machine
Going
misses.
back to Marjorie Taylor, if the Jews were in charge of this space laser, it would have been a lot better. I'll tell you that much.
If they were in charge, this would have been a different outcome. They don't miss.
That's how you use it. But they don't use it on the Iranians. They only use it on Maui. Right?
Exactly. Take down our own so that we can show the world that
absolutely.
We're going to bomb a hospital. We're using 2,000-pound bombs, not the lasers we used on Maui.
No, not space lasers.
Just use your fucking brain and some critical thinking. It's so outrageous. I hate that we have to... And then people win popularity contests to get to be in charge of us.
It's pretty wild. I've always found it so fascinating of recent bits that a large group of people are willing to accept that there are highly sophisticated machines that can control hurricanes, and we use them and weaponize them against ourselves for reasons they really struggle to articulate.
Yeah.
That totally believable. The fact that pumping trillions of toxic particles into our atmosphere on a daily basis and removing all the natural resources that replenish this survivability has any sort of repercussion, now that is wild batshit conspiracy stuff. There's no climate
Bridge
change.
too
There's
far.
Straight up weather control, though. Got it.
Makes perfect
I just
total
made a note.
sense.
That's the clip of the show. 25 minutes. Thank you very much.
Hey, you talked about having to talk your way past, police or whatever to get into the area. Obviously, maybe there are credentials, but it's not like you have an ID badge that you say, "Hey, I'm this guy, and this is my experience." What's that like, and how do you convince, a law enforcement member that you're not going to be a problem and that you actually are, trying to provide help for the situation?
I really think, and my wife and I talk about this a lot, because we just somehow find ourselves being allowed to do things that you just don't seem they might not allow everyone to do. And I honestly think a lot of it is an energetic kind of a vibe component of the person. Just they look at you and say you're not a threat, and for some reason just trust you and allow certain things like that. I think it's just being genuine is something that is actually worn on your sleeve a lot more than you can realize. And because I didn't have anything, I didn't come in and say, "Hey, let me talk to you. Let me tell you all the reasons why I should be in here." They actually did have cards to go down into Marshall, and so that was his question. He's like, "Do you have a card?" I said, "I don't have a card, but I just arrived. I spoke with someone up top, and I heard there's specific PPE needs down here, and I just want to go talk to the people on the ground real quick and see what they are so I can go get them." And that's all I said, and he just waved me through, and then I looked behind me, and he turned everyone else around. And
wow. I mean, act like you're supposed to be there, right? I guess that's part of it.
Yeah, exactly. If you act like...
I used to sneak into concerts and sporting events all the time with pretty much that same move.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the best.
Yes, I told you. I snuck into a NoFX concert in downtown LA. by somebody was. I tried to buy tickets, but it was day of, and I was crossing the street, and this drunk guy just got kicked out or something, and I asked him, and I was going to get his wristband off of him carefully, but he was drunk and just ripped it off. I'm like, well, this is almost useless, but I can work with this. I had a long sleeve shirt. So I covered it and I kind of tucked it in. I smoked a cigarette and then I put it out right as I walked in. And the guy told me I couldn't come in. I was like, no. I was just smoking. And he was about to tell me how there's a designated smoking section. I had not considered that. Two girls got into a fight behind me and he's like, just go on in. So I also got a little lucky too.
That was fortuitous.
Actually, not too far from the story of how I had to sneak my wife into Uganda. Just sometimes.
Come on, tell
that story.
Yeah.
Well, we found out she was pregnant the week before we moved there from Austria, and
by the way, congrats. Is that okay? We say
absolutely, yeah. This is.
I'm not editing. Okay, congrats on round 2.
Congrats.
Thank you. Don't. Okay, so we can't show my parents this yet because I haven't told them yet.
Okay.
This isn't live, right? No, but
okay. This will post live on Friday. This will be on the Patreon for a few days. Is that enough time?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So this was this was in with our first child, who's 4 now. This was right before the pandemic. It was 2019. We were moving to Uganda, and we found out right before that she was pregnant, and she couldn't get the yellow fever vaccine that she was planning on getting, a few days before we left, so she could have that card, and that's very important in East Africa. And so they were checking all the documentation and coming through, and I was like, we're just going to have to try to talk our way in. We already bought the flight, so we're going through Ethiopia, and we're going to figure it out. And we got there, and there was an Eritrean woman kind of struggling.
You're telling me you winged it on a flight to East Africa?
Yeah, big wing. I was like, worst case scenario, they put us on a plane back, and we figured it out again. But
yeah,
we got there,
a lot of flying.
Saw an Eritrean woman struggling to fill out her docs, so I went and helped her, which bought me time to kind of assess how the flow of the line through this this guard checking yellow fever vaccinations was, and I got to get a little gist of how it was working. And I just looked at her. I was like, just don't ask questions. Just trust my lead and do what I say. And so we walked up, and I was talking to him. He's like, you got your yellow card? I was like, of course, man. I got it right here. Just give me 1 second. And I was pulling it out, and I just, shit. And I dropped it on the ground. I turned around, I go. And while I was down there, he turned around and watched me grab it, and she went around the other side of him, and I came up and showed it to him.
Holy shit.
She was in.
This is like the whole balloon scene in Ocean's 11.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Like
it might have been subconsciously inspired by that. Yeah.
Probably. Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, it
didn't
didn't take much. I don't think I would have been allowed to stay there for a long time on that, but I did exactly what I said I was going to do, and I went up and I was like, hey, y'all need PPE. They don't have it anywhere near here. I'm going to go back to Knoxville and get it. Tell me exactly what you need. Give me a list. And I got the list from him, and I went back and got it, and that was what allowed us to be part of the next teams that went down the next day and got to do the real cleaning because we were properly protected. I mean, not enough to not get it in my fucking mouth, but properly protected.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you talk about real cleaning, what are you doing? You're cutting stuff up, you're putting it in trash bags, or what are you doing?
Yeah, that day it was all the toxic sludge. So all the businesses, just completely obliterated on the inside, just barely structural frames still in there.
Right.
Our team was clearing off sidewalks outside of a library, which is really depressing. This is an old library in Marshall, North Carolina, and they have all these beautiful old texts, probably some one-of-a-kind stuff, if we're being honest, and all of it's just
just gone.
Shoveling it out in the streets so machinery can go get it. And this guy actually pulls out a 4-pack of ironically, it's the beer I drank on my wedding day in Asheville years back. It's called Perfect Day, and found that to be quite ironic that was the beer he had.
Yes.
He pulls out 4 of them, and they're covered in toxic sludge. And he's like, "Do you guys want one of these?" And we all looked at each other. We were like, "We're not saying no." We ultimately did not drink them, but we're shoveling that, and then we got assigned to the farthest point, which was a noodle shop. A guy named Brian was out there on his own just cleaning it, and so this team of me and 3 others that I don't know how I got team leader on this. These 2 Cajun Navy guys. I think I just said the right things to the right people at the top, and I was like, imposter syndrome out the wazoo. But we go down, and what we're doing there is just scraping the bottom, 6 inches thick of just toxic sludge layered everywhere. A bunch of just items.
What kind of utensil? What implements are you using to do this? Fuck, bro.
We had shovels in a wheelbarrow to empty out the entire thing, push it out into this just giant heap of just toxic sludge and jagged metal. You know, you can't really reach down with your hands. You don't want to because you
Yeah.
don't know what. I mean, there's syringes that could be floating around. I heard of people
Sure.
getting poked and stuff.
It's just
So,
sharp objects, and I mean, when
yeah,
metal gets bent like that, yeah,
yeah, twisted metal. You know, to
yeah.
pay
Yeah.
homage.
Great game. So
Ice cream truck.
and so there has to be a whole like hazardous waste response to this to like deal with all that stuff after you like pile it up, right? Who comes in with the trucks and where do they take that shit? Do you?
Yeah, I mean it's
Servpro.
local construction crews with excavators. You know, the protocol that would be in place for cleaning up hazmat, and if let's say you're demoing a sewage treatment facility, you know, you have all these protocols in place and very specific units assigned, who goes in, then who goes out, and just all these different steps to make sure exposure is limited. Here, it is the
And who's
Wild
directing
West.
that? Like a sheriff or a FEMA authority?
This was us, and the
Okay,
idea.
so
of
you guys
the
made that
hypo
team
of-
when you talk
yeah,
about that.
in the hypothetical of like demolishing a sewage treatment facility and having to deal with all this knowingly ahead of time, there'd be protocol, there'd be OSHA, there'd be organizations there monitoring every step. Here, we were in charge. I mean, it was impromptu FEMA set up while we waited for FEMA to get to the small towns because they started in Nashville and had to work their way out.
Right. Which can we come back to that? Because I understand why they did that. But I mean, actually, can we just talk about it now really quick? You seem to hold on to, can you keep a finger in where you were?
I can keep a finger anywhere.
You seem to do that pretty well. So when I understand that they did the most that they could with the highest impact on a population. That to me makes sense.
Yeah.
And then there was so many videos of people being like, you know, one of them was kind of odd to me because it was like a guy being like, "Hey, I moved here from California. You know, I've learned real quick that like we take care of each other out here. You can't count on anybody, stuff like that." I was like, well, that's kind of true in general, and that's kind of, you know, it's kind of my outlook is like, you know, in a disaster like that, it will be nice if the government can help you, but you should not be counting on that.
Right.
Just like chances are you probably shouldn't be counting on the police saving you if something important is going on.
Right.
It's a nice thing to have. And anyway, can you talk a little about that without it being too much of a diversion? I mean, the whole large population centers getting the most attention and then what the effect was on those surrounding smaller towns.
Yeah, and one of the motivations for that is that all the major relief organizations, from you know Red Cross to the faith-based Samaritan's Purse to World Central Kitchen, North Carolina's state agencies, you know, all those are based in Asheville area too. So a lot of the stuff they have to do when they get there is figure out what the hell's going on and coordinate. And so, you know, it's frustrating that they can't just divert all resources across the board right from the get-go. But, you know, it took days for the National Guard to get there. But at the same time, you know, they're having these conversations, and local communities are like, hey, you know, right now we kind of got this. Like, we know this place the best. We're equipped to handle this. And so, you know, when I got in there the second time, FEMA had been out to the small towns that I'd worked in, and everyone I talked to there had a positive story. Every single person. You know, the guy who lost his work truck that was uninsured. You know, insurance was going to cover his home and everything because somehow he was one of the rare people with insurance that covers this level of a disaster. But his work truck was gone, and FEMA was going to buy him a new truck. You know, everyone got hung up on this.
Wow.
Well, FEMA only gave people $750. Yeah, that's the first step. They distribute it to as many people as possible so they can buy basic emergency supplies to get through the next few days.
Right.
But then when they go through, they assess, you know, they build the temporary shelters that people can live in. They provide the centralized locations once, because in the beginning it's so chaotic that you don't really have anywhere to put a temporary shelter. You know, you got to figure out where that's going to be. I watched great supply depots. You know, one built in an elementary school in the town of Hot Springs was fantastic for it, but then they lost that place, and then they had to move their location elsewhere for supplies, which was problematic because then that's when people are bringing in goods that are getting turned away because of storage reasons. But you know when FEMA gets, it's also that FEMA has an operating base that they can work from out of Asheville, where they have, you know, the resources, most of the roads and everything, and all the workforce and the agencies to really have a jumping off point. And I was back there less than a week later, and they had already established, you know, I walked into a house with National Guard. They were taking orders from me, which I found very hilarious. I was like, you guys have no idea that I should not have the authority to be telling you what to do. But, you know, we slept in the house one night with our family there, giant military vehicles out front. I was like, this is the safest I've ever felt sleeping in a disaster zone. But, you know, they worked their way from the middle out, and, you know, they really have to assess with their limited resources. You know, we don't have 60,000 people. We have our S&R teams. We're going to put those guys out there first to go save people and try to minimize casualties, because, you know, 72 hours is kind of that window to save lives of people stuck in attics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are people who got stuck in attics for 4 days. That one of my friends got helicopter or the waterborne S&R teams saved them climbing down a ladder off the top of their business and stuff while the waters were still raging and climbing. You know, they had those teams on the ground immediately, and that was FEMA, that was National Guard, that was Cajun Navy, that was the groups that are normally equipped to do this.
You keep talking about Cajun Navy. I'm unfamiliar.
Cajun Navy's I didn't know a ton about them until I worked with them, and those guys are straight gangsters. They're
Tell me about this.
yeah, so they're the guys I were with got introduced to the Cajun Navy. So as it sounds like, they're originally based from the Louisiana Bayou area. They were huge in Katrina, and that's when they really became more than like a group of, you know, country Cajun boys doing some things to a full-blown, you know, organization of S&R and other major operations. But basically, yeah, before a big storm comes in, they would hop in boats and get people evacuated that couldn't otherwise drive out. They would move around in inflatable crafts and just, you know, save pets and people and all this, and just kind of prepare for it. And then in the aftermath of a storm, they do S&R and all the places you can't get to, and they're just out there in their riverboats just saving lives. If you see footage, especially from the south, of people in inflatable duckies driving around pulling people off of rooftops, like sometimes that's, you know, the relief organizations, and sometimes that's the U.S. military and stuff, but a lot of times it's the Cajun Navy.
So they put these on trailers and drive them up to disaster areas and use their airboats like that?
Yeah, they tractor in a lot of their own stuff. I mean, it's a lot of, like, FEMA's S&R teams have their own, National Guard has their own, but I mean, we were talking to people there that were raft guides, and that's, you know, they're a raft guide yesterday, and now they're, you know, using their duckies, the inflatable kayaks, and other, you know, their river boats that are normally for whitewater rafting tours to do water rescue. And so, you know, it was everything from as grassroots as that all the way organized up to, you know, spec ops from parts of the National Guard that are, you know, highly trained for this kind of thing. And then in the middle, you have the Cajun Navy just doing what they damn well please.
Wow. You talked about so when you first that's pretty cool. So when you get there, before FEMA's able to set up, you know, operating bases and things like that, where, you know, you have a place to, you know, sleep and eat your meals and stuff like that, what are the first few days that you're there? Like, are you essentially camping out? You know, how long are your work days? You know, I mean, you waking up at crack of dawn and just going until sunset, or what's it like?
Yeah, I mean, it's they finally had to start taking breaks, but in the first few days, it was just, if you were awake, you were involved. You know, like the first night I got there, I had to go back to Knoxville before Walmart's and Home Depot's closed and grab the things necessary, and there's nothing I could have done getting back into town at 10 o'clock. So I just woke up crack of dawn and got back in. But, you know, the next night, like, I stayed with a buddy who had a undestroyed little apartment down in Asheville. But I had all my tent stuff. I had all my camping gear with me. You know, I was just ready to play it by ear. I wound up getting lucky to have people who would put me up in each of the towns. But, you know, I know a lot of people who were displaced that were just camping nearby. I mean, in the beginning, first few days, there was a lot of looters, a lot of marauders, people getting, you know, I heard firsthand accounts of volunteers getting shot. It got... You know, I had little old ladies telling me to make sure that I was carrying while I was going in there in the first few days of chaos. So, like, camping was a little risky unless you got way off the beaten path, which then you're making yourself a self-rescue issue if something goes wrong, or a late mudslide goes into play or something. But, you it was very much kind of figure it out on the fly. I never had a plan. My plan never lasted longer than the immediate hour in front of me. But for all the people there and the locals, especially the people that live there, I mean, you lost your home. You definitely lost your job. Like, what else are you going to do but devote everything around the clock to this? And especially the leadership.
Right.
And I'd like to give some shout outs to a couple people real quick, particularly Tasha from Nanostead, Meredith Brown from Hot Springs, and just there's a handful of other organizations, but those are the two people that I watched that, Nanostead is a construction company turned impromptu FEMA. That was the town I was going into Marshall with, and that led that up. And when I started, it was a small tent with about 50 supplies, maybe 2 ventilators, and a extra pair of boots for one person, and hope everyone else can find it. By the end of my first week there, they had a whole operation, a whole kitchen section, a dining hall, a decontamination section. They were having major bands like Rising Appalachia, one of the most famous folk bands from around the area, playing concerts at night, giant food trucks coming up and posting up full time. I mean, they turned it into a whole operation pretty much overnight. And then they started taking rest days. They were like, we are closed on Sunday, y'all. We've got to sleep too. But first few days,
Right.
if the sun was up, especially, people were moving, and even then, night was spent for coordinating for the next day.
I imagine that things like, simple things like concerts and things like that, morale is so got to be super important in a situation like that as well, right? Keeping people's morale up, because it's devastating. And that's where humanity really can shine through, right? Is everybody lifting each other up.
Exactly, and what a perfect area for something like that, because
Yeah,
it's
man, that's
one of
fucking
the
beautiful.
music and arts capitals of the Southeast, and so you
Right.
had
Sure.
artists creating new things out of scrap, salvaging works that were damaged and trying to redo them and putting up kind of art exhibits and stuff. You had stand-up comedy shows raising money throughout town, bands showing up at all the relief organizations around the small towns and playing concerts at night for the people. One of the things my friend told me on the way in was a good suggestion. He was like, you should bring cigarettes and beer, because people are going to be needing that kind of release. And sure enough, that someone rolls up
Yeah.
a
Prison
case
rules.
of beer and you see people way happier than
Absolutely.
they show up with PPE.
It helps.
Did yeah.
Yeah.
So some of the things that I feel like are lingering that I'm curious about, because you've been back since, you've been back
Yeah.
since everybody forgot about this. I think one of the times we tried to schedule this,
and that is definitely a point
you're
I
like,
want
hey,
to
I can't,
address
and you
before
showed
we're
me a
done.
picture of the back of your truck. You're like, this is full. I'm making a trip. So
Yeah.
no, you can go. Also, I can't always
Yeah.
hear you, but it's getting recorded fine. So feel free to keep going.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, I mean, no, we went back a second time. We followed the
So a couple of things
guidelines
that
supply
I've heard
lists
about
given to me
is
by the leaders of
like the
organizations
roads
there,
situation.
and
The roads.
yeah, so on the supply side, we were bringing stuff in that was needed on Friday and being turned away on Sunday, and so that added a little complication to some things. And then at that point, you just got to figure out where it can go. But going back in is tough, because you really have to play it dynamically and figure out kind of on the fly what are the needs that are never going to go away. Like, you bring a chainsaw in, people are going to need that. You bring some bottled water in. The last time I went in, I left with more water than I entered with, because no one wanted it, and people were like, actually, can you take this? It's in my basement now for when the next tornado comes to Nashville. But so your second question there on the roads. So a lot of roads it was interesting to see roads that weren't closed at some point be closed later, because I was like, wait, I saw a lot of traffic on this. Situation has improved, and now this road's closed. But another thing that became a big issue, was through traffic and driving on damaged roads, causing sinkholes that ultimately collapsed those roads. but also just causing an immense amount of through traffic through some of these towns that are trying to be on those streets repairing everything. And so Google Maps would direct you way around all these things, and I had to keep calling people on the ground to confirm, like, Google says I can't come this way, but I've drove it 32 times 3 days ago. Like, is it still open? And it was, but you know, they're rerouting everyone to try to avoid that. So it makes it very difficult for a lot of people to know if they can go to certain places. Like, I can't get to Hot Springs. I'm like, you can. It's just going to tell you can't, and you have to know the right way to get there on your own. You can't use Google Maps, and we don't know how to get around without that these days. But
Right.
Yeah.
you know, it's just
The old
always
Thomas
dynamic. It's always changing in so many different ways, and adaptability is just key. And you know, being able to not be frustrated with, you know, if you thought you were bringing the right things and they wind up being not needed anymore by the time you arrive. And you know, at that point, you just got to get creative and figure out what's the best way to do it. And you know, I got a lot of people asking me right now, can I bring clothes? And I'm like, they need winter clothes, but they don't think they do right now in certain ways. It's hard to think that way when you're outside sweating balls in shorts and a t-shirt that you need immense winter gear in 5 days. So it's just a dynamic
that was actually
process.
something I wanted to get to too.
Yeah.
One of our listeners lives in one of our very best. Sorry, I don't want to just call him one of our listeners. He's one of our very, very, very best listeners. Thrash, if you're listening, we
He
love
co-hosted
you.
with me a couple weeks ago. Yeah.
Yes. So we have a guy that's in school at in Boone and at App State, and he was talking
Mountaineers,
about
baby.
a week and a half. Yeah, right. They're not too happy with their football team right now. So he was talking about how, they had temps down into the low 30s a couple weeks ago. And he had stories about people being denied. Alan, what was it? They were being denied space heaters because they lived on a house that had been tagged that had like functional gas heating, but it didn't change the fact that their gas heater was just flooded and didn't work electronically.
Yeah,
Something
so they
like
didn't,
that. Right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, so they
Have
weren't.
you heard anything along those lines? And I don't know what your commentary would be on that. So feel free to say pass. We can move on to something else.
No, I went to one place with I brought in a bunch of space heaters last time, and I went to the first drop off. I could have left them there, but I was like, hey, I want to make sure I at least try to give some of these to the other town we've been working with, the other group I've been deeply involved with. And then so I took the extra ones down there, and they turned them away.
We've gone way too far in this without talking about where people can get involved with. I'm sorry. That's an important answer because I asked it, and I love my questions being answered. But I would rather we'll plug it again before the end. But wait, right about now, someone's probably thinking the way I am, which is, what the fuck can I do? Right? Like, because one thing is, this is out of people's minds, right? This is like the war in Sudan. They're like, we're on to other shit. But like, where is this? Where is this place you're involved with? How can people do that? And then we'll talk about it at the end too.
Well, for all the obvious reasons of damage directly, I was, in addition to those obvious things, I was very worried about Hurricane Milton coming right on the tail and the damage it was going to bring. Because if it was as catastrophic as they thought it was going to be, people would have completely forgotten about Western North Carolina and just days after. Fortunately, that was obviously a disaster for Florida, but they're used to that, and a lot of people had loss, but it didn't warrant a complete. This is they talked about 95% of the coastline being wiped out. We don't even know how to
It sounded
wrap our heads around that.
I mean, it
And
sounded.
then we
like
have
they
the
got
election
lucky,
right around the
Like,
corner, and everyone talking about that, and the political ads flooding everything. So yeah, people forget very quickly, and that's one of the things that I'm most concerned with, and trying to at least keep as active with social media campaigns and direct outreach as I can, just to keep it at the forefront. But yeah, I mean, my donations have plummeted. Just the ones coming directly through me, the enthusiasm, I don't have enough time on my phone to coordinate how many people are trying to help from days 1 through 4. That absolutely dwindled. But there's stuff that comes up here and there, and people want to know, how can I get involved? And still, first and foremost, the number one way is money in the right place. The local organizations on the ground will spend that money on what they need. They can pay for, if you spend $300 on sleeping bags and kids' jackets when they already have a lot of that right now, and they're not even sure how they can get all of it out to the if they can even distribute it enough, because they might just have given people those basic things. You know, you spend $500 on that, and then they're like, okay, what the hell? We have to put this in storage. If you give them $500 and so do two other people, now they have $1,500 to buy or rent. They can rent an excavator with that money, and that's what they need the most. And so they know better than anyone what their needs are. They are not, especially the local communities and grassroots organizations and towns coming together. They know exactly how to spend that money, and that money will go to proper use. It doesn't feel as good, I guess, because you don't know exactly what's happening. And, you know, you always hear people talk about the Red Cross and, well, some of that donation goes to paying their administrative staff. I'm like, yeah, it does, but also how do you think the Red Cross exists? So you're still bolstering the function, but I do get that. I stopped donating to major organizations for that reason a long time ago, but monetary donations directly towards, hotspringsrecovery.org, to Nanostead if you want to keep it in Madison County and help those organizations, to the World Central Kitchen that is still going to be.
Is that Nanostead or Nanostead? STEAD or
STEAD?
How do you spell that one?
Yep, NANOSTEAD. Okay. Yep, that's the construction company turned relief organization. The Red Truck Men over in the East Side and Black Mountain, Swannanoa, so many of these organizations have just turned from their normal business operations into relief organizations, and they need the money and they know how to use it. If donating to, I've just never been a big fan of donating to churches because I just don't feel that a lot of that money is properly appropriated. So finding the right organization, and there's good resources out there, and I can also give some if you want to, distribute to people that ask, or to your fan base. If there's a way to put it out there, I can give you a list of ones that I know need it. I mean, there's no wrong way. If you have a specific tie to a specific town, we can find you the people in that town. But if you just want to make sure people in a rural town devastated by this, that have lost their livelihoods, their homes and everything, I can give you a list of places that money can go where it'll be absolutely used immediately and effectively. The other thing is paying attention to some of these lists.
We can put that on the website. We can put it on social, all that.
Awesome. Yeah, I repost Nanostead's updated list of needs, and they get highly complex. They're looking. Let's see if I thought I had my phone in here. Like, I can just real quick, I can give you an example of some of their most recent needs right now. Like, they change every single day, whether it due to the needs they had yesterday being met. Like right now, as of 10/27, their list includes dehumidifiers, both industrial and residential, PEX cutters and plugs. They got to get through those pipes. Home fire extinguishers, four 50 by 50 inch double hung windows, 36 outswing glass exterior door, and then it goes down to the more basic stuff. Still more 3M dust filter covers and respirator cartridges to replace the respirator components they have. Clothespins, chainsaws, diesel with 6 exclamation marks, carbon monoxide detectors, a full-size refrigerator, Bluetooth speakers. Like, it's dynamic as hell in that way. And the one thing I would just say not to do right now is do what you think is just a permanent need, is come up with a trailer full of bottled water. Like, they're going to run out, but they'll tell us when they run out. Right now, they're turning bottled water away. They're turning warm clothes. We did a coat drive at a school here in Nashville, and I'm going to have to wait and probably end up going through some friends of friends on the ground to find out where we can actually get those coats, because they do need them. But when we were there last time, they're not thinking about that because, again, it was still 85 and sunny, and everyone's out there just pouring sweat and hazmat gear. They're like, I don't want a fucking jacket. So those
the
things
place where they would have put their coat was washed away with the river.
Exactly. Storage is one of the biggest issues with all of this, is that, like, it's the heart's in the right place, but it is logistically difficult for them and causes more complications than solutions in a lot of those scenarios. So, keeping track of, if anyone wants to follow me on Instagram, I post updated needs lists from a broad group, groups across the map on a daily basis, and I keep those updated so people can always look. I just had a friend reach out that she's going to be passing through and asking where she can volunteer. Right now, Nanostead is always needing volunteers, and that can be any kind of work from organization up top to hazmat, dirt work down in the streets of downtown Marshall, and they have the PPE for it. If you wanted to volunteer in Hot Springs, you have to bring your own PPE, but they have massive cleanup needs up there. Everyone has different needs and volunteers around, but we showed up to a church because college buddy of mine he's playing a band with, his brother's the pastor at a church there, so we went to go see his parents and just see how operations were going, and we were getting in the way. We weren't getting in the way, but they didn't need us. So we spent a few minutes there, kind of caught up with the family, but we got out. It's not just show up and everyone wants to take you. It has to be calculated, and the best way to do that is to do some research beforehand, whether that's talking to someone in the know. Like I said, they can follow my Instagram. I post the stories still on a daily basis of where and what is needed. And then, the third thing, financial donations, supplies with a mindful approach to what and where, and that applies to volunteer work as well. And the other thing is continuing to keep this, continuing awareness, keeping this at the forefront so people don't forget. Whether it wasn't the right time, whether people didn't realize the gravity, whether people are just getting an end-of-the-year bonus. There's just so many reasons why people are going to want
your internet's gotten real choppy, bud. At least I'm only hearing every other word here.
I hope that's not going to come out.
I don't think
hope
it's your internet. I think it's my laptop letting us down yet again, honestly. And I'm going to get a new fucking thing.
Just to summarize.
The good news is this
monetary
app records
donations
everything remotely. It's all gotten recorded. You just haven't heard it.
Cash is king.
Yeah.
Supplies or labor, but calculated in a mindful way, knowing ahead of time where you're going to go and make sure they need you. Number 3 would be raising awareness and just doing what you can to keep reminding people that this is nowhere near. It's still as devastating of a situation as it was when the disaster struck a month ago. I think we're actually on the month anniversary today. But keeping people aware of what's going on and making sure people don't forget is another huge thing people can do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Which is why we wanted to keep talking about this. That's every time that scheduling didn't work, we're like, that's fine. This is not a resolved issue. I'm glad to get to have the opportunity to spread the word about this more. Yeah.
What is your Instagram?
Yeah, I thought it was better putting some time in between. My Instagram handle is at Grizz, Grizz, Lee, like my last name, Lee, Bear 7. So Grizz, 2 Z's, Grizz Lee Bear 7. Big bear guy.
I like it.
Got it.
It's a cool handle.
I'll put it in the post, so it'll be in the show post.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll accept follow. I don't typically take strangers because I think it's people trying to steal my identity. But if people can maybe shoot me a message, let me know that they're your people. But yeah, I will. I'll be posting that on a daily basis. Needs and if anyone ever wants to send me a direct message, I'm still getting a lot of those, which is nice. Just hey, who can I talk to? And then I'll put people in touch with the right people. I coordinated delivery to an organization I had never worked with through people in Charlotte that wanted to come somewhere closer to town and get up. I can find the people and places that need it, and I can find what they need and put people in the right places. I'm happy to keep coordinating. It's hard not being there. I want to be on the ground every day, but I also can't lose my job because then I have no capacity to continue doing stuff like this.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. Still coordinating.
Well, dude, you've
and we're going back soon.
You've done so much, man.
Not this weekend, but next.
That's awesome. People like you, I think, are relatively rare in this world. I wish there were more of you. But man, just appreciate you coming on and appreciate the hard work that you've been doing out there, man. It's admirable for sure.
Yeah, dude, you're a good dude, especially
I appreciate you guys having me.
Thing
it's
underlines
very
it.
important to me to have.
You were giving your whole thing about where people can donate and blah blah blah, and you're like, well, I didn't think it was right to plug my Instagram in that moment. Your heart's in the right place, man. I can tell Alan's landing the plane. We're right past the hour mark, but I wanted to ask this question the whole time. I feel like there's a through line with everything that you've been saying.
If it helps coordinate, I'm all for it.
having a plan and then knowing that you're going to be changing your plans and improvising. Like, do you have any insight as to why you think you're good at that, or what people can be better at that? Did I ask a question right? And you completely froze. I haven't seen.
I think we all share
in a while, Alan. I think
the ultimate driver for this.
I haven't either. I don't know.
Can y'all hear me?
Well,
can y'all hear me,
folks? Thanks for listening to None Taken. Any chance? There he is. He's back. He's back. Did you hear all of that?
I heard everything. Yeah, I've been talking. I don't know if any of it got through.
You know what? I bet it did. I'm just guessing. I think everything's bottlenecking on my laptop, and it's not processing it because I'm hosting. Chances.
Well,
so
to
what's
answer
good
your
about
final
this
thought
is
question,
each one of our streams. You're good.
Yeah, no. To answer your final thought question, I think everyone has the village mentality. It's deeply ingrained in us as human beings from millennia of being communal societies. I think we all have it in us to want to help our neighbor. I think the thing that the real advantage I have is just having experience in this, and the only way to get that is to do it. So if there's ways for this to cut your teeth and for this to be the first, and it won't be the last time you step up, make a big sacrifice, and help people in need. I've watched a lot of people that are now pursuing careers in emergency management because of the work they've done in this scenario, and that's what's fascinating to me. Everyone has it. The only thing that makes me capable of jumping in on day one and doing it is just that I've done it before, and everyone does it for their first time, so that's an easy one to check off. Make this the first time, and trust me, the feeling of love and community you get from, and the inspiration you get from seeing people smile in the face of disaster, knowing at home we don't smile after a shitty day at work, just that inspires you to love all those around you, and that's what carries all of this, is just love for our fellow human beings, and we all got that. It's just tapping into it.
Yeah, I think we lost him again.
No,
you gotta get the reps.
Hopefully that came through. Hopefully that one came
there he
through.
is.
That was,
I'm sure it did.
oh, I hope
Yeah,
that
I'm
one
sure it
came
did.
through.
If there was a
'cause
pause there,
I don't know if I can repeat that one. I tried.
No, it should be
Poured my heart out, man.
So it sort of holds it. So after, I'm sure it was fantastic. So the app, just when we stop recording, just stay on for a little bit. Your computer will tell you to, but just stay on for a little bit. It'll catch up the recording. So
yeah, it'll
get all
sync
that.
everything up. Right?
Yeah.
In fact, I'm gonna have to clean up all of us complaining about the audio. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine. And you know what I will say, and if this isn't the time that you step up and do anything, like he said, as George W. Bush taught us,
just send your cash.
just send your cash.
Send your cash.
Just send your cash.
Cash is king, baby.
Cash is king. It will
Why is
go.
that in my soundboard? I don't know.
Send it to the right place. Don't send it to George W.
Absolutely.
Bush. He'll misappropriate it.
Yep. Hey, dude,
Indeed.
thank you so much for coming on. I knew when I met you, like within a minute, I was like, of us talking, I was like, this is someone to have a conversation with on the show. So glad this all worked out, man.
Yes.
Thanks for your time, and we'll have better connectivity issues next time. I'm about to throw this entire laptop. I can't wait.
Into the river.
Yeah, into the river where it'll create a toxic
Hey.
sludge.
If you're ever going to throw something like this into a natural, beautiful river, it might be where it's when it's already full of other people's shit already.
There we go. I'll go out on a trip with you, and we'll do it for the show. We'll do it for the show.
Oh god.
Hey,
It's an honor to
can
be
you give
on
us
here.
quick
I
and
really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can you
Sorry,
give
go
us
ahead.
a quick little? We like to do this as a bumper at the beginning of the show. At the beginning of the show, we like to have the guests say, I'm Ryan Lee. In your case, I'm Ryan Lee, and I never listen to None Taken. You can be snarky about it, whatever, but those are the words in general. Do you mind giving us one of those?
Absolutely. I'm Ryan Lee.
Okay.
I never listened to None Taken. But you know what? I might now.
That was fun.
Might.
I've talked over that. I have talked over that. That was perfect.
You nailed it.
That was
Nailed it.
perfect.
Yes.
You
absolutely.
understood the intention. Perfect. All right, man. I'm only gonna end this now because I'm so dead tired of this fucking computer. I'm so happy to have you on, and
Yeah, it
look
was
forward to
great.
having you on, man. And I mean, we live in town. I'll see you one of these days, dude.
Yeah, let's hang out in person soon, and happy to come back on anytime. It's an honor to be here, and I really appreciate you guys. I'm glad we ran into each other on your birthday, brother.